Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a player of League of Legends. Meet Naruto Uzumaki, a not-so-regular teen with a passion for the MOBA game League of Legends even though he sucked at it. His life was normal until he was introduced to the supernatural world and found out he had an irregular sacred gear. So, the problem? How should he fend off Amano Yuuma? With Lucian's relic pistols? There are so many choices. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 21. Alright everyone, we will leave in 5 minutes. Make sure you are ready. Ria said as she looked around the clubroom, earning nods of acknowledgement from all of her servants before she herself finished her tea, and stood up from the couch to do the last adjustment to her uniform with the help of her queen. After arriving at Kuo Academy, it did not take it long for them to gather everyone. Outside, even though it was only 8 in the morning, the sky was dark. From Naruto's understanding, a barrier had been set up around Kuo to reduce the negative effects of sunlight to devils to minimum, causing the sky to be darkened as if it was in the middle of the night. From what Naruto had learnt so far, the Mao of Foreign Affairs Seraphal Leviathan, and her brother Surzex Lucifer would be representing the devils. As for the fallen angels, Azazel and the current Hakuryuko, Vali, had shown up at school and disappeared into the conference room a moment earlier. Whereas the archangels Michael and his sister Gabriel, being accompanied by none other than Irina Shido herself, had just arrived at school on the behalf of the church in heaven. As expected, every side brought a small army of their own to the conference, making the atmosphere so tense that you could even cut it with a knife. If by chance something happens at today's conference, and the negotiation goes wrong, this place could become a battleground too. Don't jinx it. Naruto replied to his friend with a deadpan expression, making the knight chuckle nervously while scratching the back of his head. The blonde then turned his head over to Gasper, who was playing a video game on a Nintendo Switch console. Because Gasper could get too nervous and accidentally activate his time-stopping power, it had been decided that Gasper would stay behind in the clubroom to prevent unnecessary commotions. However, he was also not the only one. Ravel, keep an eye on Gasper for me, alright? Naruto asked, looking over to Ravel who was standing a bit to his side. Since Ravel's presence was not requested by the Mao, as she's not present in the Kuo battle against Kokobile and his followers, the blonde had volunteered to stay behind with Gasper and watch over him. Yes, you can trust me on this, Naruto-sama. The drilled-haired girl confidently said as she looked up at Naruto, who nodded his head at her with a smile. Try not to cause trouble, Yakitori girl. Behind him, Kaneko spoke up with her usual blank expression. What did you just call me? Alright, don't fight you two. Naruto chuckled and stepped in between them before the two could go on with their usual bickering again, causing Ravel to huff and look away with her arms crossing on her chest, while Kaneko just continued to stare blankly at the blonde. Gasper, be a good boy, okay? Why yes, Naruto-senpai. Gasper finally looked up from his gaming console and nodded his head to them. Good luck, everyone. You got it. Ria smiled as she turned her attention to her servant, announcing loudly as she started making her way to the door with Akino following closely behind her. Alright, it's time. Let's go. With that, Naruto and the rest of the club walked with Rias out of their clubroom, following behind their master, but not before the blonde turned around and nodded his head to Ravel and Gasper, who continued to look at them until the door was slammed shut. The conference meeting would be held at the meeting office of the student council in the new school building, so it took them about 3 minutes to get there on foot, and once they arrived, Rias knocked her hands on the door before entering with her servants. In the middle of the room was a round table, and sat on the chairs surrounding it were the leaders of each faction. Sona and her servants had arrived before them, and all of them had taken their seats. Naruto's eyes soon found Momo, and the white-haired girl flashed him a small smile before she returned back to her previous calm expression. The atmosphere in the room was tense and extremely serious, with the only person who didn't look at all serious was none other than Azazel himself, who had Rainier standing behind him, and Vali sitting on the chair a bit toward the back, arms crossing on his chest with a neutral look on his face. Facing the two fallen angels were Surzek's Lucifer, and a beautiful female devil with black hair and blue eyes who Naruto assumed to be Seraphal Leviathan, the older sister of Sona Citri. The last group that was sitting with them at the table were dazzling, bedecking in robes of pure white and brilliant gold, being a man and a breathtakingly beautiful woman, both with long golden hair traveling like a waterfall down their head. While the man's hair was straight, the woman's curled like gentle waves. Both were blue-eyed and held a similar appearance. They were without a doubt Michael and Gabriel, the archangel leaders of heaven. Irina Shida was standing behind them in her exorcist robe, and upon seeing Asia and Zenobia, who had a concerned look on her face when she saw her former friend and partner, she tried to avoid their gaze and looked away. The last one in the room was Graphia, who stood in a corner of the room near the tea cart, but she had a stern expression on her face that benefited her position as the feared silver-haired queen of annihilation. Seeing his sister and her servants, Surzek smiled warmly at them, while Azazel, the one who was as carefree as ever even in such a tense atmosphere, waved a hand at them and threw Naruto a small smirk. The blonde just nodded his head in acknowledgement. "Ah, the ones we have been waiting for," the governor said. With a smile, Surzek went on to introduce them to the other parties as Rias lowered her head to them. "Everyone, these are my little sister and her family. They are the ones who defeated Kokobile and his followers in the Battle of Kuo a few weeks ago. Yes, I read the report of the fight. I thank you for taking care of that incident," Michael said with a warm smile. "Well, Kokobile is on my side, so I think I owe you kids an apology," Azazel said with a nod of acknowledgement toward Rias and her servants. After that, the Gremory group wasted no time to settle down, taking their seats next to Sona and her servants, with Naruto being the last to do so. However, before he could turn around and sit down next to Rias and Asia, he heard Azazel's voice and turned around to look at him. "Nice jacket, kid." "Thank you," Naruto replied in a monotone before he sat down. "Now that everyone has arrived, I will say the preconditions for this conference. Everyone here present knows about the most forbidden subject, the absence of God," Surzek announced to the other leaders. As he sat there, Naruto snuck a glance over to Sona and her servants and saw that none of them looked surprised by the paramount news. It was obvious that they had been informed about it beforehand. With that said, let's start the meeting, and with Surzek's statement, the conference of the three factions began, and to Naruto's surprise, the next few minutes went on smoother than he had expected, with the leaders discussing the Cold War and small conflicts that they had been having since the end of the Great War. Neither side seemed to hold ill intention for other factions, and the more they talked about it, the closer they seemed to get to the permanent ceasefire between them. That is true. Michael, the current leader of heaven after the death of God, nodded his head in understanding. "If we continue it like what we are doing now, certainly the three great powers will head down the road of destruction." It was the painful truth that even Azazel, someone who looked so carefree, had to admit, because it was a fact that the fallen angels had suffered the most loss in the war among the three, and worse, the one who were without direct means for bolstering their numbers. If another war broke out, it was not that difficult to tell which side would be first to perish. "Now then, Rias and Sona, can you two tell us about the incident that occurred here a week before?" "Yes, Lucifer-sama," the mentioned two said at the same time before both of them stood up to talk about Kokobile's recent attack on their school and hometown, while everyone from the three great faction listened. Rias summarized the events of the incident as calmly as she could. She had become nervous when her brother called her name, and her nerves were so shot that when she talked her hands balled into fists. From what Naruto could see, each representative of their respective faction had their own reactions to the story. One shook their head in displeasure, one scowled, and another smiled at the end. "Fascinating, a devil wielding the power of an angel," Michael said in astonishment when Rias finished telling them about Naruto and Kale's combination that allowed them to defeat Kokobile. "I have heard many things about the summoner of the League, but I didn't expect him to be able to do something like that too." All eyes turned toward Naruto, making him feel a little uncomfortable under the gaze. "Please tell me, Was it because of your powers, or because the balance between holy and demonic just not there anymore? I believe it's both, actually. Naruto calmly replied, because of the oppositions of our natures. Kale warned me that our combination will take me longer than with others, but we ended up merging so much faster than she had expected. He then paused for a second before continuing. I see. Michael nodded his head in understanding. Thanks, Rias, Sona. You two can sit down now. Surzex said with a small smile, his tone lightening up and allowing Rias to let out a breath that she did not know she was holding, before sitting back down her chair with Sona following shortly behind her. Now then, Azazel. After hearing this report, I want to hear the opinion of the governor of the fallen angels. Upon Surzek's request, everyone's gaze was concentrated on the governor. Oh well, about that incident. Kokobeel did act on his own without informing any of us fellow leaders of the fallen angel, and I was quite content that he was disposed of before he could cause serious harm to the sisters of the Mao and her servants. His punishment is eternal freezing in the Cocytus, and I have personally made sure that he will never run free again. The explanation for that, everything was written in the material that was forwarded to you, right? That is all. Azazel started talking after letting out an intrepid smile. Seraphol can vouch for me. Yes, Azazel-san. Seraphol nodded her head in confirmation. As for the explanation, it is the worst category, but I know about the story of you personally not wanting to make anything big occur against us. Is that true? Gabriel asked for the first time, her voice soft and sweet, like a song that would last till the end of time. To tell you truth, I don't have any interest in wars. Azazel said. Azazel, this is a bit off topic, but I have intel of you locating owners of sacred gears for the past 2 decades? At first, I thought you were gathering humans and attempting to augment your battle potential. I even anticipated you to wage war against heaven or us, but this time it was Surzex who asked Azazel. And yet, no matter how much time passed, you didn't wage a war against us. When I heard you had gotten hold of the vanishing dragon, I was enveloped by a strong wariness. The Archangel Michael shared the same sentiments as Surzex. Hearing the two's concerns, Azazel smiled bitterly. It was for the sake of sacred gear research. That kid over there is the living proof that there are still so many things that we still don't know about sacred gear. The governor said, gesturing his head toward Naruto, and anyone who knew about his sacred gear, even the blonde himself, couldn't help but agree with him nonetheless. Should I send a part of the research materials to you as well as a token of peace? Even if I did finish my research, I wouldn't wage a war against you or anything. I don't have any interest in war at this late hour. I am perfectly satisfied with the world right now. I have strongly ordered my subordinates, don't interfere with the human world's politics, you know? I have no intention of intervening in religion either, nor to influence the business of the devils. Damn, does my faction have the least trust? That's true. That's right. You don't say. Were the answers that came from Surzex, Michael and Seraphol respectively, while Gabriel just stifled a soft giggle into her hand. TCH, that's hurtful. And here I thought you were all better than God or Lucifer's previous generation. The hate really runs deep in everyone's blood, huh? Azazel said with a mock chuckle before he continued. Still, everyone here is troublesome individual yourselves. Well then, how about we leave all that behind us and make peace? Upon mentioning that, Azazel uninterestedly picked at his ears in a casual manner, like it wasn't something so important to say. However, each leader of their faction looked both shocked and surprised for a short moment of silence. Rias and even Sona were considerably surprised. It was Michael who broke the silence with a smile on his face. Ah yes, now that you have mentioned it. I also plan to have peace with the devils and our fallen brothers and sisters. Even if we continue the relationship of the 3 factions like before, then it will become too much for the human world to handle. Azazel burst out laughing at Michael's words. Hot damn! The stubborn Michael can even speak something like that, even though you were all about God and God before. Everyone changed when they lost a lot of things, Azazel. Still, there's no helping seeking for things that aren't present. It is our duty to guide humans. We members of the Seraph have the same opinion that the most important thing is to watch over the children of God from now on as well, and to guide them. Hey, with your speech just now, you'll fall you know. But you took over the system, right? It has really become a good world. It's completely different from the time when we fell, Azazel grinned. We are the same, Azazel. Even if the true Mao aren't here, in order to continue the species, devils too have moved forward as well. We wouldn't want war. If there was another war, the devils will surely become the first to perish. Sirzek shared, having the same opinion as the leader of heaven. The atmosphere seemed to have lightened up a lot from there. Yes. If we do another war, the three factions will definitely be mutually destroyed. And then, it will affect the human world as well, and the world will end. We can't start a war now. Azazel nodded at Sirzek's words, with a serious expression on his face. Do you think a world without God is wrong? Do you think a world without God would decay? I am sorry to say, but that isn't the case. You and I are both living healthily like this. Azazel said while opening his arms. Is this it? There was another moment of silence before Sirzek questioned. Naruto could not help but feel that the most important conversation had finished. As Graphia dutifully served tea as the waitress, Michael directed his gaze towards Asia with an apologetic smile. Naruto, who was the first to notice it, raised a hand and asked. Michael-san, may I ask you a fairly simple question? Yes, of course. Please go ahead, Naruto-kun. Michael nodded his head with a smile. Why didn't you do anything when they exiled Asia? The mentioned girl widened her eyes at his question, looking both shocked and surprised by it. Ah yes, I can only apologize for that. The archangel began with a sad smile. After God's death only his system to govern divine protections, mercy and miracles remained. The system was, if I can explain it simply, the system to perform the miracles and etc. God had done. He made the system and used it to bring miracles to humans, to bring the effect of holy things like exorcism and crosses. Michael replied in an earnest manner. You see, after God died, an error in the system occurred. Gabriel continued her brother's words as the room fell into silence. To be honest, it takes a big toll on anyone who uses it with the exception of God. With me becoming the center, the Seraphim were able to somehow start up the system, but, comparing it to the time God existed, the divine protection and mercy to those who believe in God is not complete. It's an unfortunate thing, but those who can be granted salvation are limited. For that, there was a need to keep away those people related to the church who could possibly cause an influence on the system. As an example of those who can cause influence on the system, a part of the sacred gear such as Asia's twilight healing is included. Asia is included because she can heal also devils and fallen angels? Once again Michael nodded his head. Yes. If there is a person who can heal devils and fallen angels present within the followers, it will influence the faith of the ones around her. The source of us living in heaven is the faith of believers. Because of that, twilight healing is a forbidden sacred gear which can cause an influence on the system. And also, as an example of influence on the system the people who know about the non-existence of God, right? Zenobia interrupted Michael, who continued. Yes, that's right, Zenobia. To lose you and Durandal is a serious wound even for us. But if apart from us, Seraphim, and a part of the higher-ranking angels, if a fair amount of people who know about the non-existence of God approached the place with a direct connection, then there would be a huge effect on the system. I apologize. There was no other way, but to make you and Asia Argento heretics. Michael and Gabriel both bowed their heads to Asia and Zenobia as the two girls stared at him in wonder. No, Michael-sama, please don't apologize. Asia shook her head and said with a soft smile. The angel side looked at her in surprise, no one more so than Irina herself as she looked at the blonde and her former partner. Even like this, Till I reached this age, I was brought up by the church. I somehow felt it was a bit irrational. But if you know the reason, then there's nothing such as asking why. It was Zenovia's turn to speak, and she did so with the same smile that Asia had. The fact that you were reincarnated as a devil, that is our crime. It's all right. I regretted it a bit, but the things that I couldn't do when I was serving the church, the things that were sealed from me, are now brilliantly coloring my everyday life. If I say these words, I may anger the other believers, but I am satisfied with my current life. Zenovia smiled gently. Anyone could tell her smile was earnest and not a facade. Asia, who shared Zenovia's feelings, said with her hands clasped together, Michael-sama, I also feel the same. I am happy. Since I now have a lot of important people. And also, I have met and talked with Michael-sama, who I admired. It's an honor. Michael let out a small smile in relief. It seemed to Naruto that the Archangel still cared a lot about them, even though they had become devils. Sorry, I am grateful for your forgiving hearts. I leave Durandal to you, Zenovia. Since it is the blood sister of Surzex, then I am at ease that it won't be used for unjust causes. I also would like to address the matter of the Excalibur project, and apologize to Yuto Kibukoen. The blonde knight looked shocked as the Archangel bowed his head to him. Not long before his sister followed suit. You should never have had to experience such evil and tragedy from our priests. I know there is no apology I could give to appease your anger, but I can promise that I won't let anything like that happen again, and I'll make sure that the pieces of Excalibur are from now on will be used for the betterment of mankind, as your comrades shall never be forgotten. Yuto could only nod his head at that, smiling sadly at the memories of his friend, but at the same time happy that they would never be forgotten. Now then, I think it's time we hear the opinions of others, like those who seem like they can influence the world. Let's kick things off with the two legendary dragons that are both present in this room. Azazel then turned his attention to Issei Hayadu, making him flinch. Since I already know that Vali wants to fight those he deems strong, what do you want to do to the world, Issei Koen? Be honest, Issei. Sona reminded him in a calm tone, making the pawn nervously nod his head before answering. I want to become the harem king. Of course, not even Sona herself expected him to give such an answer. No, unconsciously she had known he would say something like that despite being in a very serious situation, so instead of looking at him like he had grown a second head, some girls in the room even having a look of disgust on her face, Sona just let out a sigh as her older sister looked and smiled at her in pity. Oh wow, that's a very straightforward answer. I did not expect that one from the mighty Sekir'Uti of all people, but at least he's honest with himself. Azazel said with an amused chuckle. Even he didn't know whether or not he should be rolling on the floor laughing while holding his stomach. Vali, would you like to have a word with your rival? I'm not interested. The silver-haired man calmly replied. Well then, we move on to our next rising star, Naruto Uzumaki. Azazel laughed before looking over to Naruto. To be honest with you, kid, when Rainier told me what you could do with that self-named sacred gear of yours, I couldn't quite believe it. It's my first time hearing about such a thing, you know, and considering that I have been doing research on sacred gears for the past 3 decades, it's really saying something. Yes, I have also looked over my father's records, but none came close to what yours are capable of. It's a very strange abnormality indeed. Michael smiled, nodding his head. Nonetheless, it is safe to assume that you are among the individuals that can leave marks on this world, Naruto Koen, with how strong you can possibly be with your champions at your side. Surzex said with a bright smile, looking at his sister for a second before turning back to Naruto to continue. What's it that you want to do in the future? What's your desire? Naruto opened his mouth to answer Azazel, wanting to tell them that his goal to become a pro League of Legends gamer had not changed, but before he could do that, the blonde suddenly felt his inner alarm go off, followed by a familiar sensation that washed through his entire body. Naruto had felt it once, so he knew exactly what it was. It was the activation of Gasper's sacred gear, Forbidden Baylor View. Break. While it wasn't the case, Kiba really had jinxed it for them. The conference had been attacked by an unknown force of terrorists, who appeared to have snuck into the ORC's clubroom and captured Gasper, using his sacred gear to time freeze everyone. From both outside the school and on the schoolyard, there had to be at least 36 magic users firing their spells at them, but all of them were negated by a magical barrier that had been set up by the leaders of the 3 great factions, who were relatively unaffected by the time freeze. At least for the time being they were safe. Among those that were naturally unaffected, Rias, who was having a private discussion with her brother, was one of them. The leaders of the 3 factions, of course, were unaffected by Gasper's time freezing power. Kiba, who had activated his balance breaker in time, and Zenobia, who had Durandal in her hand, were now standing with Naruto examining the soon-to-be battlefield, their swords proving to be strong enough to let them withstand Gasper's power. Among Sona's peerage, the Citriaris, who was talking to her sister, and the 2 male members of her group weren't frozen. Like Issei, who had a heavenly dragon inside him, Vali wasn't affected, and was standing by himself in a corner of the room, looking as uninterested as ever. The rest, however, was completely frozen in time. From the look of it, it seems these terrorists are using a spell, or a sacred gear that transfers power on the half-vampire kid's sacred gear and forces it to enter its balance breaker state. It's only a temporary balance breaker state, even then, to think that it even affects those present outside his field of vision. Azazel explained while pointing outside. Seriously? Are there sacred gears like that? Azazel nodded his head at Issei's question, before answering, it's quite normal, actually. Take your boosted gear for example. It has the endless doubling power and the transfer ability. There actually exist independent sacred gears with either of these respective powers. The doubling sacred gear and transferring sacred gear. Each of the Longinus tier gears are just combinations of abilities that aren't supposed to be combined. I see. So how do we stop it? Zenobia couldn't help but ask, but everyone in the meeting room knew the answer. We rescue him as well as Ravel. It was Naruto who said that with a determined look on his face. Still, inside, he was worrying sick for Gasper and Ravel, but he did his best to hold on to his composure. I'll go. They are my responsibilities, I will save them. I will come with you, Naruto. For Gasper to be made a terrorist weapon, and for Ravel to be captured as well when her safety is entrusted to us, it's unforgivable. Ria stated strongly with a crimson aura around her as she walked to stand in front of him, and as much as he didn't want Rias to put herself in danger, he knew now was not the time to argue, not to mention pointless. But how are you going to get to the old building? Surzex asked with a curious look on his face. The outside is infested with wizards, not to mention that the ordinary transfer magic circle is magically blocked as well. Opening a straight path from here to Gasper and Ravel's location is not the best idea. The ORC clubroom is where I keep my last remaining rook, Oni-Isama. Rias explained, making Surzex nod his head in understanding. I see, so you will castling, Rias? Sona asked as she tilted her glasses up. She wasn't surprised, having fully expected her childhood friend and rival to quickly come up with the answer to their problem almost instantly by switching your position with the rook in your clubroom. It will give you the element of surprise against the magicians guarding Ravel-san and Gasper-Koen. Plus, considering Uzumaki-Koen's summoning ability, it will be incredibly hard for the enemies to determine the number of our forces infiltrating their base. Yes, it will be an instant attack on the enemy's base. There's no chance that they will be able to expect something like that. Rias nodded her head in confirmation as Sona nodded her head at her friend. So cool. Seraphal cooed with starry eyes while looking at her little sister and Rias, causing a tick mark to appear on the former's forehead. Both of you are so smart. Right. Surzex said with a chuckle and decided to save Sona before her sister could embarrass her more in front of everyone, looking over at his maid who was making sure that the barrier around the school building was still at maximum strength. Graphia, is it possible to transfer more than one person using castling with our magic system? I do believe so, Surzex-sama. Graphia nodded her head and answered Surzex's question. We can only use it once, and it will take a lot of magical power, but it is possible to transfer Rias Ojusama and Naruto-sama to the position of the Rook without much problem. The rest of us will remain here to maintain the barrier around the school. It will break soon if we do not combine our power to strengthen it. Michael said as everyone nodded. It's the least we can do at the moment to prevent the human world from being endangered. Here, I have something for you here, gamer. Azazel said as he took out a bracelet with multiple layers of runes carved into them from his pocket and tossed it over to Naruto, who caught it in his hand. That bracelet will help control the vampire kid's sacred gear to a degree. Put it on him as soon as you rescue him. It will help him control his power somewhat. Right, thanks. Naruto nodded before he turned toward Rias and discussed a plan of attack with her. It was very possible that they were holding Gasper and Ravel in their clubroom, so they would have to act fast as soon as they were teleported there. Now, we need a distraction. We need to focus our firepower on the schoolyard as well to keep the terrorists' attention there. Azazel then looked over at Vali. You're up, Vali. With Hacker Yuku's full assault, they won't suspect a thing. Vali just snickered before saying, wouldn't it be faster to just blow up all the terrorists in the old building along with that half-vampire kid who became a problem? How about I blow up your head first? Naruto asked in a cold tone, Samira's automatic pistol and revolver appearing in their holsters at his hips. Let's try not to kill each other now, shall we? Azazel held out his hands and stopped them before the situation could escalate. Vali, inside that building isn't just a member of a mouse family, but there's also the young daughter of a noble devil household. Doing something like blowing it up is not exactly the way to negotiate for peace, you know. The governor said, but there was no humor in his tone, showing that he was very serious about the current situation. Whatever. Vala said before a pair of wings of light appeared on his back. Vanishing Dragon, Balance Breaker. After that announcement, the silver-haired man was clad in white and blue dragon scales armor that emitted a powerful aura. How about joining me outside, Hayadu Issei? The wielder of Divine Dividing asked, looking at his rival from over his shoulder. Stay calm, Issei. Do not let him provoke you into doing something stupid. You will fight with us, is that clear? Sona spoke up before Issei could say anything. Yes, Kaicho. The brown-haired boy said before looking over to Vali with a somewhat nervous, but determined look on his face. The vanishing dragon said nothing else after that, and walked over to open the window and take off, dashing and diving down into a group of magicians while creating a path of light behind him, annihilating everything on his path. Still, it did not take it long for new mages to appear on the school ground using their own teleportation magic circles and replace their fallen comrades, making their number still as vast as before. Saji, Issei, let's go. Sona spoke to her two servants and looked over to Rias. Good luck, Rias. Go save your family. Thank you, Sona. You too. Rias smiled and nodded her head to her friend, who then left the building with Saji and Issei before looking at her active servants. Kiba, Zenobia, go hold them off outside, but please be careful. I will not forgive you if you get yourself hurt out there. Yes, Bucho. The two sword wielders nodded their heads at Rias. Irina, fight with your friend. Gabriel then turned her head to the chestnut-haired girl, who had been standing by herself in the room, and told her with a smile. Gabriel-sama. Irina said unsurely as she looked over to Irina, who felt her gaze on her and turned to smile at her former partner. Let's go, Irina. Let's fight together. She said, making Irina whiten her in shock at the blue-haired swordswoman, before finally she nodded her head at her and turned her own Excalibur into a katana. The magic circle for castling is ready, Rias Ojusama, Naruto-sama. Graphia told them as a magic circle appeared on the floor before her. Without wasting any more time, Naruto and Rias entered, allowing the silver-haired maid to activate the spell and switch their position with the Crimson Rook, evil piece in the ORC clubroom in a flash of silver light. Just before they left, however, an unknown magic circle suddenly appeared in the middle of the conference room, turning the leader's attention away from them. It's them. It's the devils. They teleported right in here? Damn them. Still, both Naruto and Rias did not get the chance to think about that woman and could only hope that the leaders would be alright as they were teleported into the ORC clubroom. Just as they had expected, the terrorists were currently holding Gasper and Ravel right in the clubroom, sitting on the chairs in the middle of the clubroom with their hands tied behind their back. In Ravel's case, it appeared that she even had a cuff with magic sealing robes wrapped around her body to prevent her from using her phoenix fire, while Gasper was sitting in the middle of a large magic circle. Surprise? Naruto smirked and then unleashed the full might of Evelyn's darkness power, disappearing into it with her shrouding ability. In the dark, he drew the silver revolver from its holster to fire a full round toward one of the two magicians that were standing the closet to Ravel and Gasper, killing him instantly as Rias finished the other one with a blast of power of destruction. Naruto then pulled out his other gun and fired at another terrorist's leg, causing him to cry out in pain before falling over, but Naruto did not let him touch the floor as he ran forward and grabbed him by his cloak, using his own body as a meat shield to push toward the magicians who had recovered from their shocks and started blasting their magic wildly at him and Rias in hope of hitting him at least once, though not before he filled the magician's stomach full of lead. Once he was close enough to a female magician, he threw the body of the dead magician forward and forced her to move to the side to dodge, but the moment she regained her footing, Naruto was there to thrust his knee into her face, summoning Yon's Azakana blade to slash her across the chest. Not stopping there, Naruto dropped his remaining gun, and let it disappear to summon an Akali's kunai from her armory arsenal and threw it at a magician who used a quick teleport spell to sneak up on Rias, striking him in the head and ending his life. Get away from them! Rias roared and unleashed the full might of her demonic power, causing the whole old building to shake uncontrollably under the pressure of her aura before firing a wave power of destruction at the three magicians that tried to get to Gasper, blasting them to the other side of the room before erasing them from existence. Hold it! A magician cried out with a very long knife at Ravel's throat. You two make another move and this girl will die. You do realize that she is a member of the Phoenix, right? Naruto asked with a deadpan expression as he let the shadow disappear, making the magician look at Ravel and distracting her just long enough for him to put his hand together to quickly perform a series of hand seals that created a purple shield around Ravel's body, knocking the magician back in surprise before he was teleported to her location with the spirit blade of Shin in his hand. With a knee to her face, Naruto sent her into the wall, and then drove Shin's spirit blade into her chest, killing her as Rias finished the last terrorist who tried to make the run out of the room with an orb of her demonic power that was so powerful the walls there were destroyed. Hold still, Ravel. Naruto told the girl, and then cut off her magic sealing handcuffs with a precise strike of blade in his hand. Now that her hands were free, Ravel managed to pull down the cloth covering her mouth down on her own, leaving Naruto to remove the rope keeping her tied to the chair as Rias ran to Gasper's side and freed him. You two okay? Those bastards didn't do anything to you, did they? He asked worriedly while looking at Ravel. Gasper looked unharmed, but Ravel's regeneration ability allowed her to heal from any wound, even the most lethal one, so it was hard to tell if they had hurt her or not. I am okay, Naruto-sama. They didn't do anything. Ravel nodded her head as she answered him. I am sorry that I couldn't stop them. What are you talking about? You both are safe and that's all that important to me. Naruto shook his head and told her, finally letting himself smile in relief before reaching out with a hand to rub her head. Why yes, I understand, Naruto-sama. Thank you. Ravel nodded her head to him as a soft smile slipped past her lips, her cheeks dusting pink at the feeling of his hand rubbing through her blonde locks. Naruto then turned over to Rias and handed her the bracelet Azazel had given him to put it on Gasper's wrist, allowing him to cancel the effect of his sacred gear on their friends. Bibucho, Naruto-senpai, no one was hurt because of me, right? Gasper shakily asked, finally managing to find his voice. Yes, everyone is fine, Gasper. Rias answered her bishop with a soft smile as she helped him get back on his feet before turning over to look at Naruto and Ravel. We should not waste any more time here. Let's get back to the others. Yes. Break. Azazel chuckled to himself as he used his wings to maneuver himself between the array of attacks being fired at him from every direction, coming out on the other side completely unscathed as he smiled at his irritated opponent, a tall bespectacled dark-skinned woman with a voluptuous figure who dressed herself in an extremely low-cut dress. Down below, Sona Citri was fighting the magicians with the help of her two servants, Irina and Rias, knights, and though they were doing relatively well, they were still being overwhelmed in number by the magician, whose numbers seemed to be endless. At least, until the effect of Forbidden Baylor View came to an end. Come on, Katerea, you gotta try harder than that to take me down, especially when your plan of attack is starting to fall apart, the governor taunted as he snuck a glance down the battlefield below him, seeing that the frozen devils had returned and joined the fight. Babbling those nonsense all you want, Azazel, but soon you will realize you are just wasting my time here. How about you just stand still and let me kill you? The woman, Katerea Leviathan, a descendant of the original Leviathan, suggested with a laugh. But anyone could see the growing frustration within her for not being able to land a single attack on the blonde black-haired fallen angel who yawned before replying. Threatening all you want, it won't change the fact that you are abusing someone else's power to fight me, am I right? Azazel asked, smirking a little as Katerea widened her eyes in surprise before aiming her death glare at him. The woman gritted her teeth, but it did not take long for her to find her composure again and simply laughed at the fallen angel leader. Don't get mistaken, Governor. I was asked to kill you quick, so I decided to take a boost from it just in case. Katerea's eyes became sharp as a powerful, as menacing snake-like aura emanated from the magic circle that appeared in her hand, wrapping itself around her form before absorbing itself into her body. Do you know what this is, Governor? My already superior power enhanced by Ophis itself. I see, so all those intel Shemhaza was able to gather were all correct. Correct. Azazel smirked. Ophis is really the leader behind you terrorists, Cow's Brigade. Yes, it is. Katerea cackled as she fired a blast of black energy at Azazel, completely surpassing everything that she had launched at him so far. However, she also seemed to aware that the governor had dodged it, and spun around to attack him, only for Azazel to block him with relative ease. Using the back of his handpiece is not an option for us, Azazel. We of the Cow's Brigade will plunge this world back to the chaos. Before she could finish, Katerea heard a gunshot and sensed a great danger. Snapping her head to the side, the descendant of the original Leviathan was able to dodge a bullet firing at her head at the last second, but still she didn't do it fast enough to emerge unscratched, as it knocked off her glasses and left a cut on her cheek. Looking down, her eyes widened when she saw Rias Gremory running out of the old-school building with Gasper Vali and Ravel Phoenix, while her servant Naruto Uzumaki stood there looking up at her with a sniper rifle resting on his shoulder and a smirk on his face. You! How dare you! Katerea roared in anger as she felt blood dripping down her cheek, knocking Azazel back with another blast before sending snake-like energy beams down toward the reincarnated devil, swallowing him completely into the mass. However, the beams suddenly became encased in ice, before shattering to pieces as Naruto shot into the air like a speeding bullet with a pair of phoenix ice wings on his back. But that wasn't all. With one hand raised in the air, Naruto summoned a massive blue lightning bolt from the sky that struck Katerea right where she was in the air, bringing her down to the ground and blasting off an area around her. Before she could even pick herself up, Naruto shot down and punched the ground with one flaming fist, sending out a fissure of divine fire that sent her into the air before a magma pillar shot up and encased her within it. With his wings of ice extending fully, Naruto took off once again and launched himself through the pillar before Katerea could escape on her own, causing it to explode violently and sending her crashing into the barrier above. Before you start telling me how you came to save my ass, I got it covered. Azazel chuckled as he flew down to stand next to Naruto and looked at him in amusement. Whatever, I am paying for the bracelet. The blonde replied with a roll of his eyes. So, you merged with 3 different champions, didn't you? The governor concluded after observing the blonde carefully. He could feel 3 different powers within Naruto, each one of them representing an element that he had used against Katerea. Yes, Anivia, Ornn and Volibear. Naruto nodded as he raised his hands and summoned the power of the two demigods of Freljord respectively in his hands, surrounding his left hand in sparks of lightning and holding in his right palm a blazing flame. However, anyone who had seen him merged with Ornn and Volibear and utilized their powers before could tell they were both relatively much weaker than usual. This was a power that Naruto had come up with during his training after questioning whether or not he could merge himself with more than one champion. After some work, he had found out that his body could handle 3 of them at a time, allowing him to use multiple powers at the same time while using his own demonic energy to sustain them. However, in order for it to work, he had to sacrifice a lot of power of the stronger champions with a special summoner rune to balance them out with the weakest of the combination, as his body could not handle the strains of 3 different power conflicting against each other inside his body for too long, varying considerably in the original strength of the champions themselves. Also, it was worth mentioning that the champions themselves had to agree to be fused into with others, or else he would meet a serious case of personality breakdown in his mind. For example, Volibear and Ornn, despite being brothers, didn't get along with each other one bit and at first refused to do the Freljord gods combo. If it weren't for Anivia, he would never be able to convince them to at least put their differences aside to let him use the full might of ancient Freljord. Interesting. Azazel nodded his head in understanding, having done his research on the game to know which champions the blonde was talking about, and being able to see the obvious flaw in this triple combination of his. Still, it showed immense potentials for future developments, considering that it wasn't even his balance breaker yet, which was something else even for the Longinus tier sacred gears. Before Azazel could say anything more to Naruto, however, Katerea removed herself from the destroyed building Naruto had sent her into with a hateful glare on her face. Damn you! You low-born shit! Screaming in rage, the descendant of the original Leviathan launched a series of consecutive dark energy blasts at Naruto, forcing the blonde to dodge, but his cryo-phoenix wings allowed Naruto to avoid all of them while getting closer and closer to Katerea. Do you even know who I am? Am I Katerea Leviathan? The descendant of the original Leviathan, my blood alone is superior to yours. Don't you dare think that. Gah. The woman coughed with an expression of shock and pain on her face as Naruto suddenly appeared in front of her and drove his fist into her stomach. You know, I have met one like you before, and you are even more annoying than he was. Naruto stated and then shocked and burned her with a combination of divine lighting and fire that generated from his fist, making Katerea cry out in pain before he froze her in ice. Knowing that it would not take it long for her to break out of it, the blonde punched it with his bare fist and used his physical strength alone to shatter the ice and send her flying back and crashing into the ground. Time to end this. With that said, Naruto created a wall of true ice behind Katerea as she tried to pick herself up and brought out a horn, which he then blew into and summoned a massive goat made of fire from behind Katerea, which charged through her with increasing speed toward him, burning her up with its blazing body. Once the goat was close enough to him, Naruto headbutted it and sent it right back to the pure-blooded devil, causing it to run through her with even more force than before, crashing her into the wall of true ice with so much force that it shattered upon impact. Ah! Katerea cried out in pain and coughed out blood as she felt her organs being shattered and her flesh burned under the might of the call of the Forge God, but that was far from the end of Naruto's finishing assault, as he then shot into the air with his fist crackling in a mini lightning storm. Her eyes widened in shock and horror when she saw an image of a roaring white bear behind him, before Naruto launched himself down and sent his lightning fist through her body, engulfing the entire school in a lightning storm that sent anyone who weren't prepared for it away, with Rias and Sona protecting their servants with a combined barrier. So, this is your servant, Rias. Sona said as she increased the strength of their combined barrier to be able to withstand the power of Naruto's Stormbringer. Incredible. Rias merely smiled while adding more of her demonic power into the barrier alongside her childhood friend. Behind the two high-class devils, their servants could only watch on in astonishment at the display of strength from the pawn of Rias Gremory. Once the lightning storm ended, Naruto could be seen standing over the a horribly disfigured corpse of the devil that was once known as Katerea Leviathan, which then started to disperse into ashes soon after by just a breeze of wind and fade away from existence. Which one of you is next? Naruto then asked in a chilling tone as he turned his head around and looked at the nervous magician standing behind him from over his shoulder, effectively breaking their wills to fight and stopping them from doing a sneak attack on him. How about me then? The blonde then heard a voice coming from above him, and turned his head to see a blast of white energy with a blue aura coming toward him. Before he could summon a shield to block it or dodge, Azazel had appeared before him and created a magic circle that he used to shield himself and Naruto from the attack. You! Naruto growled as he glared at the attacker. I see, so this is what you want to do, betraying me now of all time, Vali. The governor said with a smirk as he looked up at the young man clad in white dragon armor in the sky. That's right, Azazel. Vali nodded his head in response. Guess I have really lost my edge, huh? First Kokobeel, and now it's you. Azazel muttered as he lowered his shield while scratching the back of his head. By why betray me, Vali? Sorry, old man, but these guys are just more fun to hang around with. A world of peace is a world of no fighting strong people, and that's a no for me. The White Dragon Emperor answered. So even the great vanishing dragon is submitting to Ophis? Nah, just cooperating. Ophis asked me if I wanted to fight Asgard, and it felt like it was a nice way for me to test my strength. Vali continued in a casual tone. I don't imagine you'd allow me to oppose the Earth gods ever, would you, Azazel? Nah. Azazel chuckled humorously while waving a hand in front of him. So, your desire to fight is this strong, huh? I should have foreseen this. That's right, Azazel. I want to become stronger. I just want to gain even more strength. The vanishing dragon answered with a snarl. Wow, you sound awfully like a knockoff Virgil from the Devil May Cry series, you know. Naruto spoke up from behind Azazel before casually sidestepping to dodge a barrage of energy orbs being fired half-heartedly at him and Azazel from the palm of his armored hand. So you wish to fight me, huh? Does that mean you acknowledge my strength? After what you did, yes? Vali answered. One could even hear the excitement in his tone. Aren't you destined to fight your rival the Red Dragon Emperor or something? To be fair, I have no interest in that weakling as he is now. Vali said, turning his attention over to Issei, who glared up at him at his remark. Even though we are rivals with the sacred gears of the same dragon type, the gap between us is so great, I can kill him right now, and he won't even see me coming. No, my goal has always been the defeat of strong people, and you, Naruto Uzumaki, is one of them. Is that a 1v1 challenge? Think of it however you want. With that said, Vali shot down, becoming a shooting star that dashed toward Naruto at blinding speed. Get out of my way, Azazel. Naruto said and then took off as well, flying at the same speed as Vali was doing. The governor smirked and did what he was told to do, not feeling excited enough to stand between two hot-headed men. Stay back, you two. Let them fight for a bit. Plus, you will only get caught in their clash if you try to step in between them now. Azazel spoke up and held out his hand to stop Rias and her servants from coming in to aid Naruto. The two powerhouses met in the middle of the school ground, sending out a violent shockwave that shook the entire school with their fists locking between them while glaring into each other's eyes. Naruto was the first to break the fist lock and threw the first punch, his whole arm being covered in the flame of the Forge God, sending the White Dragon Emperor flying back, but Vali was quick to recover. Naruto immediately followed up with his own attack, launching lightning bolts from the sky that struck Vali directly in the chest, but was stopped from doing serious damage by Vali's armor. At the same time, the lightning bolt generated a shield for him to guard himself against Vali's counterattack, making both combatants' powerful defenses prove to be incredibly effective against one another as they clashed across the sky, generating massive shockwaves each time their attacks connected. Divide, 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 the gauntlet shone, and Naruto felt his power reduced while Vali felt himself becoming stronger. However, that still didn't stop the blonde from delivering a powerful uppercut into his jaw, launching him up before summoning a glacial storm of driving rain and ice with an extra of lightning bolts, forcing Vali to fly around to dodge. Divide. Vali used his power once again, reducing the storm by half, and then turned around to attack Naruto with a series of blows, which he was able to block with his fist, but still felt the tremendous force behind them. Vali then gathered an orb of energy in his left hand and then launched it toward Naruto, who was forced to summon Leona's Shield of Daybreak to protect himself from the attack at point-blank range. Finding himself being pushed back, Naruto repositioned himself so that his feet would meet the ground first, and allowed him to stand his ground against Vali's blast. After a moment, it ended, allowing Naruto to remove the shield from his front. I was correct. You are very strong, Naruto. It appears that you have exceeded even your master. Vali said in a calm tone as he lowered himself down to the ground. Also, you are still somehow at your full power even after I have used my sacred gears, divide, ability on you several times. How did you do it? I'm not gonna turn into a cliché anime protagonist and tell you my secret. Sorry, but that is not my style. Naruto said with a smirk. Fair enough. But I suggest that you get serious now. My next attacks will surely break through your defense. Vali stated confidently, his wings flaring out behind him. You are welcome to try. Naruto then took a fighting stance that Lucian had taught him, getting ready for Vali's next attack. Use your balance breaker, Naruto. The vanishing dragon suddenly said instead of attacking like everyone had expected him to do, making them widen their eyes in surprise. I know that you already have access to your balance breaker. Use it so I can fight you seriously. How do you know that, exactly? Out of curiosity, Naruto decided to question his opponent. You have too much demonic power to not already awaken your sacred gear's ultimate power, even while it seems to be being used to sustain this form of you. Vali pointed out, making Naruto raise an eyebrow at him. In case you are wondering, I know because my balance breaker was unlocked the exact same way. So, you're saying that you have demonic power? Rias asked, coming to the conclusion. Vali nodded before revealing, his helmet removing itself to expose his face as he said, yes, my real name is Vali Lucifer. I am the descendant of the original Lucifer. You unbelievable. Rias muttered as the others looked at Vali in astonishment. At that, Azazel decided to confirm Vali's revelation, speaking up with a small smile on his face. It's true. If anyone has such a ridiculous existence, it's him. He will be the strongest hacker Yoko known between past and present, and perhaps the strongest of all. So, I will ask you one more time, Naruto Uzumaki. Use your balance breaker, I want to witness the full scale of your power. Vali said, as his head was once again encased in his white dragon helmet. To think I would have to fight against an opponent after just 3 months of being a devil. Naruto chuckled as he stood straight up, dropping his hand at his side as wings of ice disappeared. Very well, since you seem to have told me such a secret, I will honor you. With that said, Naruto focused his magic into the runes on the sleeves of his jackets, causing them to grow brightly as an aura flared around him. Boss, you there? What's up, kid? I am in the middle of a fight right now. I need your help now. TCH, you have any idea how ungrateful you sound, you little brat? Just be ready. I will summon you and use that power. Naruto just smirked, knowing full well that Set had already finished that fight of his. He then extended his hand to the side, and summoned Set to his side. Hell yeah, I'm undisputed. The boss grinned as he punched his fist, looking at the armor-cladded man standing before him. Tough-looking opponent, kid. Gave you a hard time? No, but he's strong. Naruto answered. I can tell. Set smirked. So you summon a champion of yours, I assume. Vali stated as he looked at Set. Even he could tell the man standing in front of him was strong, might be even more so than his summoner physically. Am I supposed to be impressed? Try to punch him, if you can. Naruto said with a smirk. I will even pay you if you manage to punch him in the face. You know what, Uzumaki, I might be too soft on you recently. Set growled in annoyance as he turned around to glare at Naruto, a dramatic angry scoff on his face as he pointed his finger down at his so-called student. The next time you summon me, I will make sure to shove my foot so far up your ass, you can feel it with your... Just before Set was able to finish that sentence, Vali had already shot forward with his fist cocking back, getting ready to punch the half-Vastayan champion. However, just before his attack could connect, the boss spun around and caught his fist with one hand, not even bulging as he glared down at Vali. Runeterra Arsenal Balance Breaker, Multiverse Transcendence. Ascend. Yo. As Vali looked at Set in shock, not because he had caught his fist with so much ease like that, but because of that announcement coming from within Naruto, and how Set's appearance began to change, Set looked to the side and asked loudly. His hair went from reddish to black, with golden horns protruding from the sides of his head. His clothing changed drastically as well, with the black fur linings around his shoulders becoming actual armors. His gauntlets, on the other hand, turned into what resembled a dragon head as a very familiar red aura flared around his whole body. Is there a doctor on hand? Asking for this one. With that declaration, the boss then threw his other fist forward, punching Vali square in the jaw with an unknown power that was so great that a crack appeared on his helmet. Sensing the danger, Vali quickly removed himself from Set and jumped back, creating a safe distance between them as he turned his eyes between summoner and champion. This power. Ignoring Vali's remark, Obsidian Dragon Set looked at Naruto as he walked to his side and said in a much deeper tone, but the previous annoyance was still there as he spoke. Remember kid, 5 full bags of gold coin for this fight, and you still owe me 100 more for teaching you to fight like the boss. Whatever boss, let's do it before you revert back to normal. Naruto said sarcastically, and stepped forward as Set's body dispersed into particles of light and absorbed into Naruto's body, giving him the armors and combat bracers the boss had worn previously, as well as the same draconic aura that he had let see how you far against a fellow dragon, Vali. Naruto spoke as the aura around him became even stronger and so much more violent, to the point that the whole school and an area around began to shake like it was being hit by an earthquake. The ground underneath Naruto began to crack, shattering under the pressure of his power as rocks and debris started levitating up in the air around him. The aura began to take shape, forming the body of a gigantic red dragon that roared and soared into the air, as Naruto shot toward Vali with his fist cocking back. He moved at a much slower speed than before, so the White Dragon Emperor was able to dodge his punch and got behind him, but Naruto was quick to react and spun around to throw his fist at his face with such speed and Vali couldn't see it. The fist stopped right in front of his face however, but that was more than enough to generate a blow that kicked up a strong gust of wind. Before the vanishing dragon could even realize what Naruto tried to do, the blonde pulled that arm of his back, creating a force that pulled Vali toward him before throwing his other fist forward, covering in an aura that took the form of a dragon head and punched him square in the face, shattering his helmet and causing him to cough blood from his mouth. The force of that punch would have launched Vali across the town, but Naruto shot his hand out and grabbed his ankle before he could get anywhere to pull him back once again, grabbing his torso, and leaped into the air while carrying the descendant of Lucifer with him, with the dragon flying around his body. Once he had reached the maximum height, Naruto then shot down and slammed Vali into the ground, generating an explosion of magma that shook the ground even more strongly than before. The vanishing dragon gritted his teeth in pain as the back of his armor broke apart, whilst the magma that was generated from Naruto's dragon showstopper began to start melting into his armor. Such strength! Surzex Lucifer gasped in astonishment as he watched the fight with the other leaders of the 3 factions. Rias-chan, Graphia, do you know anything about this power of his? As Graphia shook her head in response, Ria spoke up with a smile on her face as Vali picked himself up to start returning the favor, only for Naruto to fully prepare for him and carry on with his relentless assault. I do, Oni-sama. It's something that Naruto has figured out recently. It was thanks to you that he had the idea to try it. Me? Surzex asked in surprise. Yes, remember you asked him if he could summon Draven in his Santa Draven costume for Milika's koan? Rias asked, making Surzek widen his eyes in realization. With your suggestion, he was able to figure out his ability to change his champion's appearances with the ones of their in-game skins however he wanted. However, it was after that he found out about his balance breaker, Multiverse Transcendence, which grants him the ability to bestow upon the alternate forms of his champion meaning and powers that are all based on the stories behind the skins in the game. In a way, it's like Naruto gives his champions the powers of themselves in an alternate world, hence the name Multiverse Transcendence. So, for example, if he changes Set into Obsidian Dragon Set, then he will gain dragon-like strength? Azazel asked, though at the same time he was wondering why Naruto didn't use a dragon-slaying skin instead of Obsidian Dragon Set. Maybe he just didn't want to put himself at an advantage against Vali, and wanted them both a fair chance to win. With the increased fighting prowess of Set himself as well. Rias nodded her head as everyone around her gasped in shock. So, in League, there is a Dragon Slayer skins line. Does that mean that he can obtain dragon-slaying power too, Ria-senpai? Momo couldn't help but ask. Yes, there are skins that are nothing more than cosmetic changes, but there are skins that hold almost unlimited powers behind its story. Like the Dark Star. Azazel said with an amused chuckle, an excited smile on his face as he rubbed his chin in wonder. Or the Cosmic One, not to mention Psyops Sona, who is said to hold nigh omnipotent power. That is scary. Sona finished in amazement, unable to hold back to the expression of shock that was visible on her face. But I assume that the form is not easy to handle, is it? Yes, the champions themselves cannot hold the forms with meaning for very long, so Naruto merges with them to use that power for an extended amount of time at the cost of his own demonic power. Rias explained. Having trained with Naruto himself and helped him improve his balance breaker, she knew its current strengths and weaknesses better than anyone else. I see, so it still comes down to how much demonic power he has. Sona nodded her head and tried to sense Naruto's energy reserve, finding out that there's not much of it left. At the same time, he had also started to look quite worn down now, even though he looked completely fine before, with sweat pouring down the side of his face. His breathing was short and quick. The more punches he threw, the more tired he seemed to become. While Naruto just looked exhausted due to Set's healing power patched up all of his wounds, however, Vali looked like he had had his life beaten out of him. His armor was cracked and broken in several places, revealing much of his body underneath. He was also bleeding badly. His left arm was broken, and his lip was split from the merciless beatdown Naruto had given him. Several places of his body had also been burned by the magma that was generated from Naruto's attacks, leaving him more or less in an even worse condition than Naruto. Have enough yet? The blonde asked as he stood facing Vali, smirking tiredly as he tried to stay on his feet. He had about 1 minute and 30 seconds left before he was forced to cancel his balance breaker to prevent himself from passing out again. On the other hand, Naruto had also used so much demonic magic that summoning a champion to his aid was not an option anymore as well, so he had to make every attack count. I can still fight, you know. Vali said between rasped breaths. The real question is, how much longer can you keep that form up? Wanna see? The blonde taunted back and then got ready to meet Vali in another fight. But before he could do that, a magic circle appeared behind Naruto, and from there someone shot out to attack him from behind. Feeling the threat, Naruto twirled around with a roundhouse kick, but the unknown enemy was able to front flip in midair to avoid the devastating strike before jumping down beside Vali. Whoosh! Whoosh, that was so fucking close. He said as he put his weapon, a staff, on his shoulder. Had you not tired as you are now, I would have been in serious trouble. Naruto couldn't help but ask, who the hell are you supposed to be? A Wukong wannabe? How did you know that I am the descendant of Sun Wukong? Is it because of the staff? The young man asked while scratching his head before shaking it. Never mind that. Vali, I'm here to get you. Biko, what are you doing here? Vali couldn't help but ask as Rias rushed over to stand beside Naruto, while Azazel was walking toward them with a carefree expression and his hands in his pockets. "Yo, is that how you address someone who comes to save your ass? You look like shit, you know." Biko answered with a small smirk. "Anyway, we're smack dab in the middle of a fight with the Earth God. If you can still fight, then save that strength to help us." "TCH, is that so? Katerea failed here, didn't she?" Biko asked as he looked around. "That means your job here is done too." "TCH, fine," Vali finally said and dispelled his armor. Seeing that his opponent no longer wanted to fight, he let Set reverse back to his normal form and separate from him. Instantly, Naruto felt his strength left him and almost fell down if Rias didn't catch him in her arms and hold him up. "Thanks, Rias." Naruto smiled at his master, making her nod her head at him with a worried smile. "The next time we meet, Naruto Uzumaki, I want to see more of that power of yours," Vali announced as he fixed his clothes with a spell. "Running away now, aren't we?" the blonde taunted with a smirk. Still, Vali chose to ignore him and continued calmly as Biko opened a portal for the two of them. "Next time, I will fight you instantly with my full strength, no holding back, so you better prepare." He then looked over to Issei and told him with a scoff, "Get stronger." And with that, he left with Biko, leaving only a number of their terrorist organization back on the schoolyard. But not for long. "Now, let's clean up the trash and sign the treaty so our gamer can get back to his daily gaming day, shall we?" Azazel announced, and looked at the magicians who were cowering away from the leaders of the three factions after Graphia had lowered their barrier down when the terrorists had stopped attacking them to run away. "Don't get cocky. Once our reinforcements get here, you will." "Which reinforcements?" Naruto asked with a tired chuckle. "Break. Cry, you little bitch." Evelyn laughed as she shoved her hand into the crotch of a magician, and then lifted it up, tearing the poor human right up the middle before she arrived at their heart. "Fuck yes. I miss this feeling." With that said, she yanked the still beating heart out, ending the magician's life. "Fuck. I'm so hot." The sultry demoness moaned, as she caressed her cheek with one bloody hand and licked at the blood on the heart with her tongue. Can you please do that somewhere else?" Ari asked in slight disgust as she helped Blitzcrank bring down another magician at the outskirts of Kuo Town on Naruto's request. Not too far away from them, Yasuo launched a tornado at a group of enemies, hurling them up into the air to allow him to dash through them with deadly strikes of his katana. "Don't ruin the mood, Ari," Evelyn husked as she found her next prey. Despite having the least kill among them, all the corpses around her were horribly disfigured, and the reason for it was because Evelyn had spent her time torturing each and every one of them, having granted the permission by her summoner. "I'm so gonna have sex with Naruto tonight." Naruto could only sigh in defeat as Blitzcrank pulled another enemy to her with his rocket grab. "This is strange," Yasuo said as he looked around. There were some left, but not as many as he had expected them to be, considering the number of magicians they had been told to have shown up at Kuo Academy. "I thought there would be more of them." "Maybe they ran, I don't know," Ari answered with a shrug. Unbeknown to them, the one responsible for the lack of enemies were watching them from the rooftop of a nearby abandoned building, appearing to be a man and a woman wearing cream-colored cloak. Once the four champions of the league had taken out the last enemy, the man then put his hand on the woman's shoulder and together they disappeared in a yellow flash. And with that, the meeting of the three great factions had come to an end, and the peace agreement known as the Kuo Accord was signed. Chapter 22. What's up? When Naruto, Rias, Asia and Ravel walked into their clubroom that morning a few days after the peace conference between the three factions, the first one to greet them was none other than the governor of Gregoria Azazel himself, who was sitting comfortably on the seat normally reserved for Rias as if it was his, drinking the tea that was being served to him by a reluctant Akino. Moreover, he wasn't the only one, as there was also Irina Shido, who was standing with Zenobia, giving off a holy feeling that Naruto had only felt once before from the archangels Michael and Gabriel. "Azazel, What are you doing here? Rias asked the governor in surprise, a cold gleam in her eyes as she stared at the governor of Grigori. Now, I don't think that's the way to talk to your teacher. Azazel had already declared with a cheeky smile, making Rias and those who had just arrived widen their eyes in surprise. You see, starting from today, I will be the club advisor to the Occult Research Club, as well as a chemistry teacher of this school. It's a direct request from Surzex, so the sister of Leviathan made the arrangement for me. Please call me Azazel-sensei, but the governor is fine too. Rias looked like she wanted to oppose the idea, but when she heard her brother's name, and that it was his idea, there was nothing she could say. So, I figure you aren't just here to teach us chemistry, are you? Naruto asked, as he kneeled down on the floor and opened his backpack for Yumi to come out, and then head over to her usual spot on Kaniko's lap. Oh, yes. The condition for me to be here is that I work to help you guys improve your sacred gear, especially you Naruto, since I am quite knowledgeable in the matter and have a lot of time to spare. Azazel answered with a smile before his tone became somewhat serious. You guys have also heard about it, but we are now allies with a common enemy in Kao's brigade. My job is to help you prepare for them when the time comes. Are you saying that they will attack this place again? Rias questioned in curiosity as she took her seat on the couch across from Azazel with Naruto and Ravel. It is very unlikely, but possible. After all, from the information we have gathered, Kao's brigade is an organization consisting of many different groups with their own agendas. Who knows what they might try to do? Though the whole world is on full alert now, Kao's brigade would at least have to think twice before making their next moves, so you kids will have some time to prepare yourself when they come. Azazel replied with a shrug, saying so seriously also, don't forget about Vali, who has formed his own team with the likes of Biko, the descendant of the original Monkey King, Sun Wukong. His rival, the Welsh Dragon, is here at Kuo, and he has also found a worthy opponent in your pawn. It is very likely that he will show up in the near future to challenge you for a fight. Everyone nodded their heads in understanding. Also, to strengthen the bond between the three factions, it has been decided that Irina Shidu, Heaven's representative and messenger, will be transferring to Kuo Academy as a second-year student next semester. For the time being though, she will be a member of the Gremory group. Azazel then introduced while gesturing his hand to Irina, who smiled brightly and struck a cute pose as a pair of white wings appeared on her back and a halo to form above her head, much to the surprise of everyone in the room. Please accept me and take care of me from now on, Irina cheerfully said as everyone gave her a round of applause, with Asia and Zenobia being the ones who clapped their hands the loudest. Once the welcoming ended, Irina then made her wings disappear and walked over to Asia, grabbing her hands as she lowered her head. Asia-san. Sorry I called you a witch last time. I'm so sorry. Asia merely smiled and shook her head at the chestnut-haired angel's apology. I do not mind. I hope we can get along as we all love the same Lord. The same with me. Zenobia smiled as she walked over to the two girls. This was also my fault for acting without thinking. After all, I became a devil right away. But I'm glad we're together like this. And with that, the three began to pray, with Asia and Zenobia suffering no consequence or whatsoever. On his request after the peace treaty was signed, Michael had done an adjustment to the holy system, allowing devils who still believed in God and his teachings like Asia and Zenobia to be able to pray without suffering a massive headache. It wasn't much, but that's the least he could do for Asia, knowing her habit of praying had been bringing her a lot of pain recently, even after learning that God was dead. So, you are an angel now? Were you secretly an angel before? Naruto couldn't help but ask as he and Ria sat down next to Kaniko and Yumi, his girlfriend not looking at all pleased that the duo-colored-haired governor didn't look like he would be removing himself from her usual seat anytime soon. Yeah. I received Michael-sama's blessing and became a reincarnated angel. I heard that the Seraph used a technology based on that of the devils and fallen angels, making this possible. The evil peace system, you mean? Azazel raised an eyebrow with clear interest in the topic. It had only been a few days, but it appeared that the alliance between the three great powers had already advanced that far. Maybe it was because of the threat of Chaos Brigade in Ophis too. Since new angels could not be born because of the death of God, they were the weakest in number, giving them a massive disadvantage in the battles ahead. Yes. It's called the Brave Saints, Irina answered with a nod. Currently, the four great seraphs are the only ones who have it, making 4 sets of 13 cards of the standard 52-card deck. Michael Sama is the spade, Gabriel Sama has the suit of heart, Raphael Sama with club, and Uriel Sama has the diamond suit. So, the king is the master, I assume? Azazel asked in interest. Man, those angels really work fast. To be able to create something so interesting with the technologies we gave them. So which card are you, Irina? Rias asked curiously. I am an ace. The chestnut-haired girl answered confidently as she showed them a symbol of the ace of spade on the back of her head, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Michael Sama's ace, to be exact. I received a position of honor. Even if the Lord doesn't exist, I can continue to live like Michael Sama's ace. She then continued also, when he reincarnated me into an angel, Michael Sama said that he can imagine a special rating game between the evil pieces and the brave saints happening in the future. For the time being, only the seraphs have them, but in the future, the high-level angel Sama, in addition to the seraphs, could use the system, and he hopes we will be able to compete against each other in the devil's rating games. Everyone looked very surprised at the prospect, while Azazel looked very impressed. Oh, I get what Michael is thinking. Azazel smirked while rubbing his chin. We have been at wars with each other for so long that a common enemy and a few leaders coming together to sign a piece of paper is not going to change the way we view each other, so why not prepare for a representative war where everyone could loosen up on the spirit of peace and sportsmanship? It would be like a World Cup or an Olympics in the human world. Rias finished, looking very excited at the idea of competing against the angels' brave saints. It won't happen anytime soon though, maybe 10 or 20 years from now. But speaking of rating game, the governor of fallen angels then turned his head over to look at Naruto, the corner of his lips curving up into a smirk before he continued. Did you know that a game mode based on League is coming very soon? Wait, what? Really? You serious? Naruto spluttered, feeling his jaw hitting the ground as he gasped in shock, a feeling that was shared by everyone who knew about League, while Irina and Zenobia could only look at them in confusion. Still, beside the newest member of the club, they all knew that aside from the standard chess game rules, there were many more special rules for the official rating games matches, from an all-out battle like one-day-long war game, to the objective-based games like Scramble Flag. Naruto then spun his head over to look at Rias, who then smiled apologetically at him before saying, showing that she had known about this too. Sorry, Naruto. My brother contacted me and told me about the new game rule earlier this morning. I want to tell you and everyone at the same time today. Still, Azazel is telling the truth. It's Azazel Sensei for you, Rias. Sorry, Azazel Sensei. Rias replied to him sarcastically before she turned back to Naruto. Anyway, Ajuka Beelzebub-sama, the creator of the evil peace system, has decided to add a special rule into the rating game and create a new objective-focused game mode based on League of Legends, with how popular it has become in the underworld thanks to you. Naruto couldn't only look at his master in amazement. He did not know what to say. It will take some time for us to see it in an official tournament though, and the organizers need some time to work on the rules since many peerages have more than 5 members including the kings, but they have already started setting up the field for us. For us? Yes. Rias nodded at him with her eyes gleaming with excitement. In a month's time, we will be participating in the Youth Devil rating game tournament that is hosted by the 4 Great Mao themselves to have the young devil heirs compete against each other in order to increase our power as well serve to test the new game mode for the fans of official rating games tournament. To say that Naruto was shocked would be an understatement. Oh wow. Was the only thing that he could say. Ajuka-sama and the organizers of the rating game tournament will contact you soon, I believe, since you are more or less the representative of the League in this world. Rias then continued with a declaration, but also because of it, we need to prepare the best we can for this tournament. That's why next week, we are heading to Reykjavik, Iceland to watch the 2021 League of Legends Mid-Season Invitational. Naruto widened his eyes in surprise at that. So many things had happened recently that he had almost forgotten about the second largest league's event of the year, the MSI. Don't expect us to be the only ones there though. Knowing Sona, Serorg and Seek Vera, they will probably try to get there as soon as possible to see League at the highest level to prepare for the tournament too. I see, wow. Naruto could only nod his head and reply like that to his master/girlfriend, who continued to smile at him. So once we are done with MSI, we will go to the underworld for this tournament? Yes, and also for everyone to meet my family too. I always come home at the start of summer vacation, so make sure to clear your schedule. Rias told him, making Naruto nod his head. Not that he had ever had anything to do beside going to that summer camp or staying at home playing League all days, so he would go anywhere Rias want him to thinking about it. It will also be Asia and Zenovia's first time too, right? Asia nodded at Rias' question. Why yes. I'm nervous about going to hell while I'm alive. Too thought if I were to go there, it would be when I died. Yeah. I actually have been interested in the underworld and hell for quite a while now. Now that I am a devil, there must be zero chance for me to go to paradise now. I feel a certain irony in setting foot in the same world of those who went to hell for a divine punishment. Hell, huh? That suits an ex-believer turned devil. You too. Naruto chuckled forcefully with a nervous sweat drop, as Irina began to start praying alongside them. Of course, for believers like them, the underworld would be the place that they wanted to go to least. We are going to spend the rest of the summer vacation there until around the 20th of August. Rias then said, before turning her head over to look at the angel of their group Irina, you can tag along too if you want. I can go with everyone to Iceland, but after that, since it's hell, I really don't want to go, but I don't want to be left behind too. Irina asked with her hands clapping in front of her chest. What should I do, Michael-sama? Please show me the way. I think that's all for now. Rias said as she stood up from her seat and clapped a hand in front of her. Let's start Irina's welcome party, shall we? Yo. What about me then? Right, Azazel-sensei too. Chapter 23. Yes, I understand, Ajuka-sama. Naruto grinned. Among the devils he was talking using a number of communication magic circles on the table before him. One of them was a handsome young man appearing in his early 20s, with light blue eyes and green hair that was slicked back. His name was Ajuka Beelzebub, and he was the chief advisor for the technology department of the Devils and the creator of the Evil Pieces system and the rating game. I have sent Yumi back to Runeterra earlier tonight with your message to the High Council of the Institute of War. I have also talked to the High Summoner about your idea, and since he and the other summoners didn't seem to have anything against the idea, I'm sure that we will be able to make it official very soon. Glad to hear it, Naruto-kun. Ajuka smiled as the representatives of the organizers of the official rating game tournament nodded their heads in agreement. If things go smoothly, we will be able to finish that Summoner Rift-inspired game field soon. We will let you know the moment it is finished, Naruto-san. A male devil who seemed to be the boss of the group of devils said while rubbing his chin, making Naruto smile excitedly at that. He could be the first young devil to witness a real-life, or at least this world's, version of the Summoner Rift, something that he had seen so many times before in Riot Games videos and wished it was real. Also, thank you for making this possible, Naruto-san. Many fans have been losing interest in the old game modes recently. It's my honor. Please don't mention it. Naruto shook his head and answered the man immediately. Will there be neutral objectives, Ajuka-sama, like the dragons or the Baron Nashor? The person who asked that question was none other than Rias, who was sitting with Naruto on the couch in the VIP room on the 6th floor of his house. Standing behind them were Grafia and Ravel. The latter had become a manager of sorts to Naruto on Surzek's request. Apparently, with how famous he and his champions, especially Sona, had become among the young and adult devils alike because of League and the announcement of the new mode of the rating game. Having someone to help him, and maybe even his champions deal with the incoming advertising invitations, sponsorship contracts, might not be a bad idea, considering that several modeling requests had already started coming for Sona, but arriving in his mailbox instead. They had to have been thinking that he was Sona's manager or something like that.
I don't think that you can summon a giant purple worm from the void for us, can't you, Naruto-kun?
Ajuka asked with a small, amused chuckle, making Naruto laugh sheepishly before continuing. We are currently in the talk with the leaders of the dragons that are our allies. One of them is a referee for official rating games tournaments, so it won't be difficult for us to strike a deal with them and have them participating in the new game mode. However, don't expect them to be defeated so easily, since dragons are the most powerful and prominent species in our world. It's never a wise choice to engage a dragon, whether it be a low-class dragon or one of the heavenly dragons, head-on in combat.
I see. Naruto nodded, sweat dropping nervously.
He had read about the strength of dragons of his world in the books written about them, and knew just how dangerous they could be. That will be it for now. I will make sure to keep you guys updated if there's any changes. Ajuka said, looking over at Ravel, who then lowered her head and bowed to him, understanding very well what she needed to do.
See you soon, Naruto-san.
And with that, Ajuka and the representatives' holograms disappeared, allowing Graphia to dispel the communication magic circles on their end and letting them stand up finally and leave the room to head back to theirs, with Graphia not forgetting to remind them to go to sleep early because they had a flight to catch tomorrow's morning. Knowing Graphia, she would probably want them to have enough time to have more than enough time to get themselves ready before going to the airports, even though she had already prepared their luggage for them. It had been an exciting evening for Naruto, and he intended to finish the night off with a blast. Tomorrow, they would travel to Reykjavik, Iceland to watch MSI 2021, and it would be the first ever international event that Naruto was able to watch live. Not only were they there to watch League at the highest level, they were there to prepare for the upcoming unofficial rating game tournament for Young Devils Heirs, where they would host the first ever real-life League-inspired game mode, so to say that Naruto was excited would be an understatement.
So it's still pretty early, do you want to play some League or head straight to bed?
Rias asked, smiling at Naruto as the two of them entered his room, closing the door behind him with a foot. As much as Naruto wanted to grind for some LP before the trip to Iceland tomorrow, sex with Rias was not something he could turn down so easily. It had also become a nightly routine for the both of them whenever Rias could be alone with him in his room. Before he could answer her, however, Naruto suddenly felt a presence behind him, and Rias widened her eyes a little when she saw a pair of glowing yellow eyes in the darkness behind her boyfriend. Before he could react, he then felt a pair of slender arms wrapping around his waist, removing his pants and stripping him down to his underwear very quickly, before two hands were shoved up the trousers to grab his dick.
Evelyn, don't just creep up on him and start doing something like that.
Rias scoffed lightly while looking at Evelyn, who shed her demon shade to fully appear beside Naruto, her head leaning against his waist as her arms were around him.
I don't see him complaining, isn't that right?
Naruto didn't say anything in return, but the expression on his face answered it all, as he was truly enjoying Evelyn's handjob as she fondled his balls and worked his cock expertly with her hands, earning them both an annoyed scowl from Rias. The Crimson Heiress couldn't help but wonder why she had let the Demoness convince her into getting Naruto to accept the fact that he definitely might have a harem in the future, with how some girls had started having romantic feelings for him. In all honesty, Rias did not need Evelyn to talk to her about it to see that girls like Asia and Momo Hanakai of the student council had had a crush on her beloved pawn/boyfriend for so long. It was no secret that in the underworld, a lot of high-class devils have harems, especially the strong ones who had proven themselves to be the symbol of strength and power, like the devil Naruto was becoming at a rather fast pace. It's not something that they talked about often, but it was also something of an open secret. Guys like her ex-fiancé Razor Phoenix wasn't just the only devil who turned his whole peerage into a harem. They're just the most obnoxious ones about it. As much as she wanted to be selfish and to have Naruto all for herself, She didn't want him to feel troubled when a lot of girls that they were close to express their loves for him, knowing that it's never easy to turn someone's feeling down, especially for someone who cared so much for others like Naruto. Not that he would ever go out his way and look for harem candidates like some perverts, but Rias had talked to him about it a few days ago, and the two of them had come to a mutual agreement that for the sake of each other's happiness, as long as he didn't try to sneak around her back and start sleeping with girls left and right, she would be fine with Naruto having intimate relationships with other girls. It was somewhat difficult, but for the first time in her life Rias had decided to put her selfness and greed to the side. When she loved someone, their happiness became her happiness, and she would do everything she could to make the people she loved happy. She loved Naruto, and she loved girls like Asia and Ravel too, with the latter had started developing a secret crush on him ever since he saved her from those magicians with Gasper, maybe even before that, so it's natural for her to go out of her way and do everything she could to make them happy. About Evelyn, in the past, one of the only things that held Naruto back from just letting loose and fucking the shit out of Evelyn to put her in her place was his wariness of her being a demon who liked to inflict the most agonizing pains on other beings through tortures, but now that he had gotten stronger, Naruto now could easily restrain her if he wanted to, which at the same time made it so easy for him to do whatever he wanted with the shameless demoness, who were all too willing to let him put a leash on her neck and fuck her however he wished, which had soon become too tempting for Naruto to resist. The other reason, obviously, had been her, but now that Rias had given him the green light, nothing was holding him back anymore.
How about we skip the boring-ass game and go straight to do something a bit more exciting, home?
Evelyn asked seductively, standing up a little to whisper into his ear, her hand peeling down his boxer to reveal his semi-hard member, hardening with the magical works of her skillful hands, before her lasher came out and did the rest, leaving him bottomless between the two women.
Mao. Stop it already, Evelyn.
Before Rias could say anything, Rias had already shot her arms out and grabbed his head to pull his face toward her chest, removing him from Evelyn, but causing his face to plant firmly against her breasts. Although there are still her shirt and bra in the way, Naruto could only marvel and wonder at how amazingly large and soft Rias' breasts were. You have already had him for yourself 3 nights straight, Evelyn.
Don't just try to hop him all for yourself like that.
Whatever, princess, you can have his face, and I will have the things down here. With that said, Evelyn slid down to a kneeling position behind Naruto, teasingly kissing his butt before moving her face down even further to kiss at his hanging balls, smiling lustfully as she used a hand to keep his rapidly hardening cock from raising up. Naruto shuddered and groaned as Evelyn sucked, kissed and licked repeatedly at his scrotum, working her tongue all over the leathery sack of his family jewels before she took one into her mouth to begin sucking while her hand slowly and leisurely stroked and tugged at his dong.
Not to be outdone by the lustful demoness, Rias cupped Naruto's cheeks in her hands and pulled him up to kiss him, allowing his hands to start unbuttoning her shirt, pulling it open to reveal Rias' bra-cladded breasts. As they tongue entangled with each other, Naruto hooked his thumb under her brasiers and pulled it up that way, letting her breasts spill out and filling the palms of his hands with them, making her moan into his mouth as he groped and kneaded at the massive springy mounds of her tits. Having gotten his cock rock hard, Evelyn moved to his front and took it into her mouth to suck, loudly and sloppily, bobbing her head back and forth and blowing her spit and saliva all over his fully erected member as she raked her long fingernails lightly on his muscled thighs. She continued to blow him like that for several more seconds, before throwing her head forward and deep-throating his whole member, causing Naruto to break the kiss with Rias and groan in pleasure. It soon became too much for the blonde to handle, and he had no choice but to blow his first load of the night into Evelyn's mouth, which she gulped down and swallowed all too happily and eagerly. Once she had sucked up all of his semen, Evelyn pulled her head back and looked up at him while nibbling her bottom lip. Whatever challenging taunt she had planned to issue, Naruto was having none of it. His hand reached out and closed around her throat, and with one strong bicep flexing, he lifted her off the ground and began to drag her to the bed, knowing that she could handle such treatment, being turned on even. His cock was erect, jutting in front of him as he walked. With his opposite arm, he scooped up Rias as well and carried her to the bed, drawing a moaning squeal from the crimson-haired princess.
Arriving at his bed, Naruto tossed Evelyn on it and used the shadow power she had taught him to use to strip her naked. He then glanced at Rias, expecting her to do the same, and grinned smugly when she started stripping all too willingly, getting herself down to her birthsuit and coming to lay down next to Evelyn, who turned around and offered her ass to him. Naruto could feel his mouth water as he looked at their delicious bodies, his cock lurching in arousal to the thought of spending the night with them. "You wait right there." Naruto pointed his hand at Evelyn and said in a commanding tone, even though he could not stop himself from smiling smugly at how much power he had over her. The demoness merely whined in disappointment as Naruto scooted over to Rias, placing his hands on her thighs and opening her legs up and pushing them back to spread her wide open for her, exposing her wet, pouty cunt lips. Naruto then got himself above his girlfriend in a classic missionary position, and then slammed his cock deep down into Rias' dripping pussy, his hips slapping against hers as his dick tunneled deep inside. Having gotten past the point of shyness and lack of experience, Naruto and Rias could now start having sex just for the fun and pleasure of it, so he wasted no time to start fucking his cock down into her, one hand shifting to her ankle and using it with her thigh as a handhold to thrust into her. Building up a decent pace for himself, Naruto fucked Rias hard and fast, his pelvis colliding against her crotch as his balls swung and slapped against her butt. Rias moaned as her toes curled and her legs kicked weakly in the air beside Naruto as she came around him, but he didn't slow down in the slightest, doing so hard enough to make her body shake and her eyes roll back in her. Soon, he got his whole body to work, muscles flexing powerfully as his hips smacked off of Rias' luscious figure, hands moving away from her legs to grope at her tits as he fucked her, squeezing and rubbing them with greed. For several minutes, Naruto hammered his master like a bent nail, banging her long and hard. Rias absolutely loved every second of it, coming a number of times. Naruto soon came also, hilting himself deep inside and filling her womb with his seed as Rias moaned out in much delight. Naruto waited a beat after he was done coming and then withdrew, grabbing his cock with one hand and then milking it with a long, relaxing strokes to send a hot rope of his cum onto her face like he was marking her with his seed, before looking over to Evelyn, who wiggled her ass at him invitation. It was truly a lewd sight, and Naruto could feel his resistance falling. "It's time to violate me however you want, stud," Evelyn said sultrily, twerking her ass at him, and Naruto had to wonder how many men had been baited on by those sweet words before she gutted them alive, yet he got to do it for free with absolutely no consequence, at least for the time being. Rearing himself toward her, Naruto gave Evelyn's gorgeous, sculpted as a spanking that made it jiggle and wobble excitingly, making the demoness pout with her cheeks puffing out cutely, but when he repeated the act again and again, she could no longer stop herself from moaning in delight, even when he grabbed onto her short silver hair and violently yanked her head back. "Here I come, you fucking slut," Naruto growled and angled his meat at the entrance to her ass before he started pressing it inside with steady force, causing Evelyn to make an incompetent noise as her eyes rolled back. Gripping her narrow hip with his other hand, he drove into her, fucking his whole cock into Evelyn's asshole and drawing a lustful moan of pleasure from her as the result. Planting his feet and bowing his legs, Naruto started to pummel down into Evelyn's asshole from above, burying and withdrawing his cock at a much faster pace than what he used before, while simultaneously using the grips on her hair and her hip to pull her back and meet his thrust, causing her tongue to loll out of her mouth as she shook and moved her hips back to him on her own, adding into the force of his thrust. It did not take it long for Evelyn to start coming and squirting her juice onto the bed, but Naruto continued to hammer away into her asshole, keeping up the same speed and strength even after minutes of non-stop fucking. "I'm coming." Even with an iron will, the incredible clenching sensation of Evelyn's tight ass proved too much for him to handle, and Naruto soon found himself bury himself balls deep into her ass and began to come, unloading every drop in his semen into her bowels, his mind numbing as he experienced the hot, pleasurable sting of thick ropes of jizz rushing through his meaty pipe and blasting off from his tip. "Fuck yeah," Naruto grunted as he slowly pulled his cock out of Evelyn's asshole before he welcomed a fully recovered Rias into his arm and kissed her, his cock continuing to stay erect even after all that. It did not take it long for Evelyn to rejoin then, and the threesome ended up having sex till midnight.
break. The next morning, exactly at 8:30, Naruto and the Occult Research Club, who had gathered at his house, left for the airport with the teleportation magic circle Graphia had set up for them. Since Kuo had yet to have an airport, they had to go to the one in the next town, which had a private service for the devils in Japan. Even Sona and her peerage, who appeared to have already left for Iceland yesterday, had to go to that town for their flight. Since it was more or less a field trip or a summer club activity for them, everyone was wearing their school uniform, with Naruto proudly bringing his new summoner jacket with him. The old one had been destroyed in the fight against Vali, much to Gwen's horror when he summoned her hoping that she could fix it for him. So of course, the hallowed seamstress had to make a new one for him with a much more durable material, but no less comfortable than the last one. Seeing Gwen's sewing talent, Rias had also thought about asking her to make them a uniform of sorts in the Youth Devil Airs tournament. So even devils use planes to travel the world, huh? Azazel asked with a grin as he came to stand beside Naruto, who was watching Asia, Zenobia and Irina, the recently dubbed church trio, while they were excitedly discussing Reykjavik's tourist attraction with a travel catalogue. The group had arrived at the airport a few minutes ago, and were now waiting for Rias and Aquino to return as they had left a moment earlier to make an arrangement with the staff of the airport who were devils. It appeared that Rias and her family had a surprise waiting for them. "We can use teleportation magic, but Bucho thinks it's more fun for us to travel by plane. Plus, we are also in no rush. MSI starts in 3 days, so we have plenty of time for sightseeing too." Naruto answered with a shrug. That's what Rias had told him when he asked how they were going to go to Iceland. "Just call her by her name whenever you want, kid, everyone knows you two are dating." The duo-haired fallen angel chuckled in amusement as he patted Naruto on the back. "Can you stop calling me kid?" I will, as soon as you start addressing me as sensei." Azazel laughed at the blank face Naruto was giving him. "So your champions aren't coming with us?" The blonde shook his head and then explained, "I can always summon them, so there's no need for anyone who is staying at my home to tag along with us. If they are interested in the trip, they can always call me so I can summon them once we are in Iceland." "I see, damn, and here I thought that I could meet Sona in person to ask for her signature for Shamhaza. He's a huge fan." The governor grinned, taking a mini poster of Sona from the inner pockets of his jacket. Naruto wasn't surprised at all. Since her last public performance, Sona's reputation had skyrocketed, and she was now regarded as one of the most sought-after young musicians in the media industry. Now that the Devil faction had become allies with angels and fallen angels, of course she would start being recognized by them too. Also, because Sona had an extreme prominence in magic, many high-class devils wanted her for their peerages, with the last one claiming that she's worth at least 2 bishop pieces. However, Sona had turned them all down, not looking for giving her service to anyone but the summoners of the Institute of War, including the honorable young summoner Naruto himself. Lady Phoenix had also offered her full protection. The high-class devils had no choice but to turn their heads away, but no one knew if they would ever stop trying. Naruto really hoped that none of them would try to do anything stupid, or else he wouldn't know what he would do to those prideful shits if they forced Sona to become their servant against her will. "I will ask her later, if you want," Naruto finally said. He didn't know if Azazel wanted to ask Sona's signature for Shamhaza, one of the other leaders of Grigori, for himself, considering that he carried a poster of her in his jacket, but he knew better than to question the man, not when he's also a big fan of the Maven of the Strings himself. "Thanks. So, how's your training coming along?" Azazel then asked, looking very interested in the subject as he was the one who designed a special training method for him in order to increase his demonic power and prolong the time that he could maintain his balance breaker and stay in it, with Ari and Evelyn taking turn being his training partner, and occasionally blitzcrank for Naruto to see what he would turn out fusing with a robot with abilities like him. Naruto then went on to explain everything he had done so far with Azazel's special training, with the governor listening and taking notes whenever there was a problem that piqued his interest. Eventually, Rias and Aquino returned, but they weren't alone. There were 2 people or devils, Naruto assumed, walking with them.
The first being a beautiful girl with blonde hair tied in a ponytail and blue eyes. She wore a costume that is open in the chest area, revealing her large breasts and cleavage and part of her stomach. The costume has a section cut off in her arms, revealing her shoulders. The second devil greatly reminded Naruto of Set, but friendlier and more energetic, with his tall and extremely muscular build. However, the most noticeable thing about him was that he had a face that somewhat resembled that of Rias and her brother Surzex, with short black hair and violet-colored eyes. Naruto also noticed that he had a strong aura of power about him, something that could be seen from powerful fighters like Set. Among their group, only Kiba, Kaneko and Ravel were the ones who were able to recognize the young man and the girl that was with him instantly, though Azazel looked like he had a basic idea of who they were. "Everyone, this is Serord Bale and his queen Keisha Abaddon. He's my cousin on my mother's side, and the heir of the Bale clan." Rias introduced them, making Naruto look at the grinning young man in interest. If he's Rias's cousin from her mother's side, then he came from the devil household of the great king, whose status was right next to the Mao themselves. There has been an issue with his flight, so I invited him to travel with us. "How do you do? I'm Serord Bale, the next head of the Bale family." Serord reintroduced himself in a strong, somewhat majestic, but friendly manner whilst his queen lowered her head respectfully to them. "That young man right there is the current strongest young devil, and an opponent of you in the tournament, possibly the strongest." Azazel leaned toward Naruto and told him, making the blonde nod his head in understanding. After a series of quick introductions, it was Naruto's turn to greet Serord and his queen, having stood up from his seat and walked over to stand next to Rias. "Serord, this is Naruto Uzumaki, the summoner of the League of Legends." The heir of Bale smirked as he offered Naruto his hand. "I have heard a lot of things about you. It's a pleasure to finally be able to meet you in person, Naruto." "Only good things, I hope." Naruto smiled before he took Serord's hand and shook it, noticing how his grip was like an iron clamp even if he wasn't even trying to be intimidating or show off or even anything close to that. At the same time, the young Bale heir had also noticed that Naruto was barely affected by the strength of his grip. "Yup, and saw lots of good things from you too. I especially like the way you punched your fist through Razor's gut months ago and—" Before he could finish that sentence, Keisha thrust an elbow into his abdomen, and even though he didn't even flinch, she was able to gain his attention, and Serord finally noticed the drilled-haired blonde standing at the back of the group. "Oh, my deepest apologies, I didn't mean to say that." "It's all right, Serord-sama. My brother deserved to be reminded that his power isn't absolute." Ravel shook his head and answered the tall man calmly. "I see. Anyway, I would like to thank you all for getting my cousin out of that marriage engagement with Razor. No offense to you or your family, Ravel," Serord said, adding the last part to Ravel, who nodded her head in understanding, showing that she didn't mind at all. "I was in the spectating area to cheer for her and you guys, and I was very happy that you finished it with a spectacular victory. I look forward to fighting you guys in the upcoming tournament, especially you, Naruto Uzumaki." "Just Naruto is fine, Serord-san," Naruto answered simply, allowing a smile to make it to his face. Serord reminded him of Sona Citri, a very respectable high-class devil just like his master Rias. Razor and Sona's pursuers sure had left a very bad impression on him about how high-class devils were. "And I also look forward to the day I can see and test myself against the strongest young devil. I don't know what to expect just yet, but I know that it's not a day that I will be able to forget." "Love to hear it." The young Bale heir grinned. Naruto could see that the man was genuinely excited at the idea of fighting him. "Rias Oju-sama." A male devil who was dressed in a unique crimson flight attendant uniform then approached them and lowered his head to Rias, speaking to her in a respectful tone. "Your flight is ready for boarding. Please follow me." Rias nodded her head in understanding, before turning her attention to her servants and cousin to say to them, "It's time, everyone, let's go." "So, are we talking about a private jet or something?" Naruto asked with a grin as he came over to walk next to Rias, who winked at him in response, though he and the others, especially the new ones, did not have to wait long to get a proper answer for that question, arriving at a private hangar where a superyacht-sized jet was waiting for them.
Whoa! Asia, Zenobia and Irina all gasped in amazement while gawking at the jet in front of them. Oh damn, really shouldn't expect anything less from the Gremory. They really do want nothing but the best for their servants, huh?
Azazel asked in amusement, before he went after the church trio to enter, winking at a very attractive female flight attendant who stood at the head of the staircase leading up to the jet as she lowered her head to him with a smile.
Talk about travel in style. Naruto hummed while looking around and taking in the luxury, lavish-looking cabin. It had more than enough seats for their whole group, Serorg and his queen. Toward the end there were a fully stocked bar and assortments of snacks and food for them to enjoy, a full-sized shower, a formal but high-class dining area, finished with a full galley and entertainment space. The seat is so comfortable.
Irina cooed as threw herself into one of the seats, feeling herself getting sucked right in comfortably.
So Bucho-san, how long until we get to Iceland?
We will be there in a little over 20 hours, so get yourself comfortable, because it's going to be a long flight.
Rias answered the angel girl with a smile, handing her bag over to a flight attendant before she turned to Serorg, who had just entered with his queen. Make yourself comfortable, Serorg.
Thank you, Rias. The Belair grinned, nodding his head in appreciation to his cousin. Once everyone was in, it did not take it long for the rest of them to settle in, with Rias taking a seat in the front, not because she wanted to sit there, but because Aquino had already taken the seat next to her boyfriend. The cabin rattled just a little as the jet took off, and soon they were in the air. The hours passed by idly as the group of devils spent their times chatting, or playing standard games, with Azazel doing nothing but flirting with the beautiful bartender, while enjoying the exquisite drinks that she served him. Eventually, Naruto settled in a game of cards with Irina, Zenobia, Ravel, Gasper and Kiba, mostly because Ravel was invited to play but she didn't know how, so he decided to sit with her and teach the girl how to play the game.
Kaneko was enjoying some snacks with Yumi, while Aquino was talking to Keisha. The two queens probably had met each other in the past. Meanwhile, Serorg and Rias seemed to be having a conversation about the upcoming tournament.
Naruto wouldn't say that he was eavesdropping on them, since the two didn't look like they wanted to keep it private, but from what he had heard so far Serorg had probably done his research on League. He didn't know if the guy had played the game yet or not, as he looked like a man who would fly around and be a superhero in the morning, and spend his time punching boulders and working out intensely in the afternoon, but Serorg definitely looked like he knew what he was talking about. Competing against him and his peerage in the tournament wouldn't be so easy, Naruto could already tell.
Yes, I heard Seek Vera would also leave for Iceland this afternoon.
Hey Ravel, who's Seek Vera?
Another heir? Naruto looked at Ravel and asked her.
Yes, Naruto-sama. Seek Vera Agar-sama is the current heiress of the Agar's household.
Ravel answered him as she looked up from her set of cards, looking somewhat relieved and also all too eager to answer his question.
So, the devil who held the highest second rank in Devil Society, Archduke, and that was as far as he knew about them, as he had not done much research on the remaining 72 pillars of the devil factions. Together with Riasama, Sona-sama, and Serorg-sama, Seek Vera-sama is regarded as the Rookie's Four, or the Four Young Kings, who are best known for training themselves and their servants.
I take that it's not something many high-class devils do, huh?
Saying that is an understatement, Naruto-sama.
Ravel answered with a shake of her head. Most pure-blooded devils, like my brother for example, would not train, and instead, they would depend entirely on the demonic powers that they inherited and would simply trade off any of their servants that they deemed weak. That's why the Rookies Four are said to belong to something that is out of the ordinary, but together they have gathered a generation of promising young devils that are on an exceptional level.
Damn, then she's another opponent we will have to watch out for. Naruto said with a chuckle, and the way Ravel nodded her head in confirmation showed just how seriously strong the heir of the Agars and her peerage were.
Who are the other competitors, by the way?
Zephador Glagiolabula-sama and Diodora Astaroth.
Ravel said the last name rather distastefully, and the lack of honorable suffix evidently showed just how much she disliked that devil. If Naruto remembered correctly, among the names that Rias had mentioned going to Iceland to see the MSI and Study League to prepare for its version in the rating games, those two had never been mentioned, so it wasn't that hard for Naruto to come to the conclusion that the two were typical high-class devils. Both of them are relatives of two of the current Mao, Beelzebub and Asmodeus. However, what piqued his interest was Asia's reaction when she heard the last name. "What's wrong, Asia?" Naruto couldn't help but ask, as Asia tilted her head to the side in confusion and looked like she was thinking very hard. "I think I might have heard the name Diodora before. I don't remember where, but," she said slowly, making Zenobia and Irina widen their eyes in surprise as Naruto looked at her thoughtfully. He was sure that before meeting him, Asia had only met one other devil, and healing that devil was the reason why she was deemed a witch and banished from her home. Could it be that Diodora was that devil? And if so, what was he doing in Italy at the time to get himself hurt so bad that he ended up needing Asia's help? It was also worth mentioning that he seemed to be someone Ravel had absolutely no respect for. It appeared that he needed to keep an eye out for Diodora in the upcoming tournament. Break. In the end, it took them exactly 20 hours to arrive at Keflavik International Airport, which was 31 miles away from Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland. The weather was extremely cold, so they had to wear a lot of warm clothes to not turn into popsicles. Although Seror didn't look like he was affected much by the low temperature, making Naruto wonder if he had ever trained on a snow mountain or something like that before. Damn, it's cold. Naruto shivered while washing his hands in a restroom of the airport, before he then dried it with a hand dryer, feeling a lot better with the hot air blowing onto his cold hands. Still, he couldn't stay there all day. Kiba and Azazel had already gone ahead of him and regrouped with Rias and the others, so he had to hurry too. But on the way, Naruto suddenly noticed something that was definitely out of the ordinary, or rather, someone, a young girl with long black hair down to her hips and black eyes, wearing a black gothic Lolita dress with a large purple bow on the back of her hip. She was looking directly at him while standing completely still, but people walked past her as if she wasn't there at all. "You lost, little girl?" he asked, looking at the black-haired girl before noticing a very familiar present behind him. Almost instantly, Naruto spun around and summoned Jin's pistol rifle, the Whisper, in a flash of light, aiming it directly at the spot between Vali Lucifer's eyes, but the White Dragon Emperor didn't even flinch, merely smirking at the blonde summoner in response. Before he could open his mouth to speak, a tear appeared in the space between him and Vali, who then jumped back to make room for a bespectacled young man with blonde hair with a strand of hair across his face, and dressed in a business suit. He wielded a two-handed sword that was giving off an intense aura of dread, making Naruto realize that it was a holy sword, and an extremely powerful one at that. Sparks flew between them as Naruto summoned Yon's Azakana blade and attacked him without even a moment of hesitation, but the other swordsman easily blocked it with his blade. "Lower your weapons," the enemy said in a very calm tone, and Naruto's eyes widened just a little as he found his body moving without his control. His legs shook a little and his mind rebelled, but Naruto forced himself to not listen to the order, keeping his weapons firmly in his grips. "Impressive. He is resisting your order," Arthur Vallis said from the side, sounding genuinely impressed with his arms crossing on his chest as his sacred gear Dividing Divine appeared on his back, but the people around them didn't seem to notice it, seemingly under a spell, or perhaps it's them who were being concealed away from the human eyes. Nevertheless, it did not take it long for the area to be clear, leaving only Naruto, Vali, Arthur, and the little girl who was still standing there looking at him with a small smile. "It is admirable," the swordsman, Arthur, said as he readjusted his glass, holding Naruto back with just only one hand on his sword. "However, it's useless. None can defy the power of Excalibur Ruler, the strongest among the Excalibur fragments." "You will." "How about no?" Arthur was interrupted by the voice, and moved his head to the side just in time to avoid a simple, but incredibly fast straight punch from Naruto, feeling it graze his cheek and draw an amount of blood still. Not giving him with enough time to make another command with that weird power of his sword, Naruto called for the power of his champion, and threw another punch at him.
This one, however, was covered in a mini lightning storm, with the silhouette image of the relentless storm Volibear surrounding his whole body in the form of the demigod of the storm's Stormbringer ability. Although it was nowhere near as great as the one he had used to finish Katerea Leviathan, the intense power Arthur was feeling proved that Naruto would blow his head clean off if he was able to land his blow. Divide, 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 divide. But just before Naruto could do just that, Vali had activated his Sacred Gears ability and stepped in between him and Arthur to catch his fist with a hand, decreasing the power of his mini Stormbringer strike to safely hold it. Naruto then swung his other hand with Jin's pistol up, but dark purple ropes suddenly shot out of the spot near his feet and wrapped around his wrist, immobilizing his arm and stopping Naruto from shooting Vali in the face. Glancing over that direction and saw a woman lying on a billboard beside the wall. She looked young, maybe in her early 20s or something, with long black hair and split bangs that gave her a sort of wild but sexually beautiful kind of look. She had yellow eyes with slit pupils like that of a cat, staring at him with a hint of amusement. In a way, she kinda reminded him of Evelyn. Beautiful but in a dangerous and sensual sort of way. Her clothing also emphasized this look of hers. It didn't appear to be anything unusual, just a black kimono and a yellow obi, showing that she's at least Japanese. However, the kimono hung loosely off her frame, leaving her shoulders bare and exposing a luscious amount of her incredibly impressive cleavage. Her outfit was finished with a set of golden beads hung from her waist, and an ornate headband sat upon her head, right next to her most noticeable features, a pair of triangular cat ears, with two black tails swished behind her. "So, this is your team, Vali?" Naruto asked. "Give me one good reason I should not summon Aurelian Soul on you guys right now." Despite his current situation, Naruto confidently said, the runes on the sleeves of his jacket glowing radiantly. Having mastered his champion's summoning ability and the summoner runes, he did not need his hands to summon his champions to his side, and he made sure that Vali and his little group understood that too with the runes that were appearing and spreading out on the floor around him. "Oh, how scary, Naya. Naruto glanced over to the cat girl, who giggled playfully while saying that to him. The way she talked reminded him of a league player he randomly met in rank at least once in a while. Their username was also Black at 1123, which fitted her almost too perfectly. She wouldn't happen to be that player, right? The same reason I have not gone into my balance breaker and fought you right here, Naruto-san. We are not here to fight you," Vali said as he released Naruto's fist, making the blonde look at him suspiciously, but did not lower his guard. "We're here because she wants to talk to you." "She?" Naruto asked, glancing over to the gothic Lolita girl, who had come to stand next to Vali as Arthur sheathed his sword. Now that she was standing closer, Naruto could see a hint of her pointy ears, which was hidden very carefully under her long black hair. "My name is Ophis." The girl introduced herself, shortly and simply, making Naruto widen his eyes in shock. "I have a proposal for you, Naruto Uzumaki." That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.